I've worked with Dan for a number of years, and he has worked with other celebrities, not quite of my stature, but Victoria Principal and people like that. And Dan produces television shows. He writes television shows. He's a consultant on them. We're talking about infomercial shows, and he has been the driving force, the driving creative force, the man who put together some of the most famous and most profitable television infomercials of the last 10 years. There is nobody in the United States I would recommend hire you consider working with if you have any interest in this area other than Dan Kennedy. He is also a dynamic speaker. I'll tell you a little personal inside secret about Dan Kennedy. When he was a child, this is really true, this is not a joke, he had a terrible stuttering problem. And through a force of will, he overcame that by public speaking. And as you can see, as you will soon see, he has become one of the most electrifying, most informative public speakers that I've ever had the pleasure to share a podium with, in addition to being one of the most knowledgeable people in the world in his area. Would you please welcome my friend Dan Kennedy?
So, no, I got the other mic.
Oh, okay.
I am? Yeah. Well, that's not good. They may breed or something. That's better. In addition to having been the driving force behind some of the most successful infomercials that have ever been made, I've been the driving creative force behind some of the biggest failures that have ever been put on videotape. And I want you to know that maybe unlike some speakers, I will probably talk to you almost as much about the losers as we go along this afternoon as I will the winners, because in many cases, we still don't know why the winners worked, but we kind of think we know why the losers didn't. And so there's more to be learned from the failures sometimes than there is the successes. What I'm going to do, so that you kind of have a feel for the agenda of our time together, is I'm going to give you a very quick overview of the infomercial business as it stands now and kind of how it works. And then I'm going to go through 14 factors with you. And you all do have handouts if you want to use them that'll help you take some notes. If you don't want to use them, that's okay too. But the 14 factors that we use to try and predetermine the probability of the success of a project. And that particular little chunk of information will be of value to you even if you never do anything in the infomercial field, because many of those 14 factors are transferable to other direct marketing applications. And then last, I'll show you how a project comes together, what the numbers are, how much it costs, how much you make, how much you lose, what the risks are, and all of that. I have something that was given to me as a gift recently when I spoke at Notre Dame, and I think it probably applies to this entire group, and it's fun, so I like to share it to start with. Now, you have to pay close attention because we're going to go through 5 slides. This is this is an autobiography in 5 chapters. And chapter 1 is, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk, I fall in, I am lost, I am helpless, it isn't my fault, it takes forever to find a way out. And chapter 2 is, I walk down the same street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk, but I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again, I can't believe I'm in this same place, but it isn't my fault, and it still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk, I see it is there, I fall in, it's a habit. But my eyes are open, I know where I am, it is my fault, I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk, I walk around it. And chapter 5, I walk down a different street. Hopefully, maybe as a result of some information I share with you this afternoon, maybe I can keep you from going through chapter 1 and chapter 2 over and over again at least. I may not be able to get you to chapter 5, but in specific to infomercials anyway. A quick overview. Reasons to do an infomercial. It's very significant that direct income is number 4, not number 1 on the list. There was a day in the infomercial business where it was a place to go get rich quick. In fact, the business literally started that way in more ways than one. A fellow by the name of Paul Simon, who was what I call a get-rich-quick in real estate seminar giver, and I mean that with no disrespect, but that's what he does. He was doing very well with his 2-hour seminars, and he had a fellow by the name of Ray Lindstrom said, I wonder what would happen if we put this on television. And so they took a video camera and they went into a room where he was doing his seminar, just like this, with an overhead projector, and they taped the thing with no lights, no production values, no nothing. They just stood there and videotaped it. And they bought 2 hours on the USA Network and threw it on the USA Network. They paid back then $5,000, I think, for the 2 hours. And lo and behold, they sold $30,000 worth of home study courses at $295 a piece. And Ray Lindstrom said, I think there's a business here. Those days are gone. I mean, gone, 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 gone. Many of the infomercials you see on the air today are being very happily aired at break even or barely beyond break even, and they are airing a lot. And that is because of their ability to deliver a customer base in a very short period of time free, not because of the money being made on the front end. And so I tell people today, the reasons to be in the business, if you are going to do an infomercial, are in this order. Number 1, you want massive exposure for your product or service or yourself in a hurry. Nothing beats TV. Johnny Carson, who just retired, as you well know, was seen during his entire career in America's living rooms only a few times more than Tony Robbins has been seen in America's living rooms in the first 18 months he was on the air. The odds are that of any 1,000 people stopped on the street, just as many of them would recognize and come up to Tony for an autograph as would go up to Johnny Carson. In fact, it's possible Tony would win. That's the kind of power that television has. Jay Cordish, the original Juice Man. How many have seen the Juice Man? The original, Jay cannot walk through an airport or a shopping center without somebody coming up and sharing a recipe with him and asking for his autograph. Jay's book last year of juice recipes in the bookstores, published by a real publisher, hit the New York Times bestseller list the first week it was out. That's the exposure power of television. One of my clients, we have a little show called the Golden Opportunity Show, and it gets leads for a business opportunity called Gold by the Inch. The first version of the show we produced was real cheap. The second version was just cheap, and now we're about to do a good version. But show's been on the air continually for 3 years, and I mean, this is a non-celebrity, cheaply produced kind of rinky-dink show, and this guy can hardly go anywhere without somebody recognizing him. Sometimes they can't identify what, but they remember TV. Didn't I see you on TV? Haven't I seen you on television? So if you want massive exposure, you can't beat television. Second good reason is to build a list fast. That, of course, presumes you have something to do with that list when you get it. And we're going to talk about the back-end business later, which is what this is all about. There's no quicker way on earth. You know, if you have a magazine ad that works, let's say that you've got a full-page magazine ad that sells a book about whatever. Let's say blackjack. You've got a full-page magazine ad that sells a book about how to play blackjack. And that ad really works. How many places can you run that ad in a month? 5 magazines, 6 magazines, 10 magazines that are really appropriate to that? But if you've got a TV show that works, you can run it 100 times a day. I mean, you can run that show like there's no tomorrow. And so with your magazine ad, it may take you a year to get 100,000 names. You can have 100,000 names from television in 6 weeks. That's what I mean when I say build a list fast. There are a number of businesses that have started with nothing but an infomercial. And the Victoria Jackson Cosmetic Company is an example, started with an infomercial, about $100,000 of investment. In the first year, that was a $100 million company, thanks to the strength of the database. That's when I say fast, that's what I mean by fast. Last is build recognition fast. You build recognition for your own product and personality. You also contribute to the entire industry by accident. The #1 selling appliance last year in department stores for Christmas was a juicer. It wasn't the juicers being advertised on TV, but it was juicers. By accident, the recognition factor causes all those other sales. And now retail and wholesale and our business, the infomercial business, in realization of all this, are coming together, and TV products also find their way into the stores and find their way into catalogs at a much faster pace, and that becomes additional distribution, additional income. And last then is the direct income you get from the show. The two things that surprise people most that you really need to know is, one, the infomercial business is a very, very risky business. It looks easy. I mean, you see 6 or 7 of these shows, you're smart people, you can obviously identify some of the commonalities, and you say, hey, I can go get myself 3 guys with cameras and some lights and a potted palm and a couple of chairs, and I can make one of these too. Transferring, I'm a print copywriter guy. How many in here have my book, The Ultimate Sales Letter? Raise your hands, please. Good. I'm a print copywriter guy, and making the transition from doing print to doing television is maybe the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. These things are very, very difficult. And the proof of that is that the industry average in the last 12 months is 16 attempts to get 1 winner. That means that 15 people get the bad news on Monday morning after the test. And that bad news is, take your tax loss out into your backyard and bury it. Don't try and fix it, bury it. Knock on wood, my average is a little bit better than that. And you can bring your average up markedly if you stay with real safe categories. If all you ever did was weight loss and skincare, your average would not be nearly that bad, because it is almost impossible to shoot yourself in the foot with weight loss or skincare. You may have legal problems, which is another issue we'll talk about, but it's almost impossible to make a show in that category that doesn't work. It's just a question of how well they work. But the further afield you go from that, the greater the risk. And the second thing, of course, is that there's a lot less profit than most people think on the front end. The industry today looks kind of like this. This year, it's going to top $1 billion worth of merchandise sold through the infomercial medium. A major New York ad agency, by the way, was quoted in the New York Times 2 months ago saying that they are advising their clients not to pay any attention to this thing. It's going to go away, which tells you my opinion of ad agencies. Most of the money is made on the back end. There is increasing sophistication, increasing production standards that are an issue. Some networks, some cable stations are pickier and pickier about what they'll air and what they won't. It's a highly regulated industry. We live with the Federal Trade Commission in our back pocket. They don't like us. The no money down entrepreneurial deals. Hey, I've got a great product. Here, you guys do a show. Those things are just about a thing of the past. Famous people are being turned down on deals like that left and right today. The deal flow that comes through Guthrie Ranker's offices and my offices is just phenomenal. And if you saw some of the stuff they said no to and told stars with products to go and come back when you have a check, you would just be flabbergasted. I'll tell you how deals go together later, but no money down is a thing of the past, and it's still the fastest way to go to customers. The business used to look like this. The caption on this cartoon says, yes, Hal, I sent for your course, listened to all the tapes, and even though I had poor credit and no cash, the very next day I went out and bought all the sex I needed with no money. In spite of that, the public acceptance is actually better than ever. In spite of that kind of sleazeball infomercial, and in spite of some of the media bashing, the public loves these things. The buying public is just thrilled with them, and any one given week last year, as much as 10% of the United States population made a purchase from an infomercial. When I do my little informal surveys, like when I'm on an airplane, just about everybody has broken down and bought something from an infomercial. Many of them, gadget type products. And the demographics are surprisingly good. A lot of people think that infomercial buyers are low-end blue collar. That's not true. In the case of Personal Power, for example, well over 50% of the buyers were in the top 20% of the income brackets in the country. The company breakdown, this is an old slide, and unfortunately I didn't have time to update it. Some of this no longer exists. Media Arts is, I believe, the number one big player in the industry today, and Media Arts owns Quantum. Quantum went bankrupt, as some of you may or may not know. I know because it affected my royalties, and they were bought by Media Arts. American Telecast does the Richard Simmons Show, which I'm sure you've seen, where they all cry together. And it's an amazing thing when you can have a chubby guy selling weight loss. It's just amazing to me. And they do the Victoria Jackson cosmetic show, which is fabulously successful. Media Arts is best known for Amazing Discoveries, all of those. All of the Amazing Discovery shows added together do about $150 million a year in business right now. Let's see, Guthrie Ranker's up in the neighborhood of $100 million this year. Personal Power alone has done over $80 million. And I'm talking about the television sale. I'm not talking about back end now. The original Guthrie Ranker show, the first show I ever worked on in my life, was Think and Grow Rich. And we managed to eke out $20 million with Think and Grow Rich, and we thought we were really doing something. These days, that's small numbers for a winner. Just so that you know, in terms of my direct involvement, I can account for $100 million worth of goods sold in shows that I have had substantial control over. There's some other shows where I've just been a consultant. I don't even count that. And I do have a pretty good reputation in the business. I'm a member of NEMA, National Infomercial Marketing Association. If any of you are going to the conference in October, I'll be there and be on a panel. And fairly well connected and do work for just about every major player we just talked about on that slide and play shows with them. Here very quickly is a recent scorecard. You'll see a list of winners and you'll see a list of losers. For the sake of time, we're not going to talk about all the losers right now, but I'll briefly mention some of the winners. How many of you have seen the Entrepreneur Magazine Be Your Own Boss show? It's hosted by Fran Tarkenton. Okay, that's an interesting show. That's had two lives. That show, the first time it aired, it ran its course in about 6 or 7 months, and it made a little money, but it certainly wasn't a blockbuster. And it went on the shelf, and it was dusted off about 4 months ago and put back on the air, and it's doing very, very, very well. And you'll see it increasingly airing. How many have seen Therapy Plus? Little gadget you rub here, pain goes away. In the tens of millions of dollars last year. Show aired for almost 2 years. Now finally has a regulatory problem due to some of the medical claims made in the show, which I fully expected a year and a half ago. And the show's being re-edited to make changes in that, but a very successful show. How many have seen the Acne Statin show with the little Nazi woman that looks like Dr. Ruth with the cure for acne? Raise your hand, huh? And Gloria Loring, yeah. Extremely successful show. Victoria Principal Skincare, of course. The fishing show is an interesting story. If I have time, I'll tell you about that. And the Go by the Inch show is the single most successful lead generation show, a show that doesn't make a direct sale, but instead gets leads, which are then followed up by direct mail. Single most successful show of that type ever to be an infomercial. That's a business opportunity show, by the way, and there's room for that, by the way. We could be doing more of these. This is just a great business opportunity cartoon. If I had someone like you, Cheryl Ann, I'd get into the rug and upholstery steam cleaning business like it says on this matchbook cover and really be somebody. I just really like that cartoon. Okay. You guys are going to be a tough group, huh? You bowl overhand, right? Okay. Okay. Here's the 14 factors that we use to the best of our ability to try and predetermine whether or not a project has a probability of winning. And basically what we do is we look for each one of these 14 things and we give them a 1 to 10 rating. And if we got a lot of 7s, 8s, and 9s, and 10s, then it's worth doing. If we got a lot of 2s, 3s, and 4s, it's not worth doing. And the very first thing we look for is a strong, clear promise. You have, in this television show, you have two things that are problems. You have the opening of the show, where in 30 to 45 seconds, certainly no more than a minute, your host should come out and tell people what's going to happen in the next 27 minutes. And that had better be a very compelling promise. We have to remember all through everything I tell you that unlike in a seminar room, or unlike with a direct mail piece, or unlike just about any other media on earth, in this media, we are facing a room full of people with clickers in their hands. And they have 136 choices that they can go to at a moment's notice. They're sitting there with picture-in-picture window television sets, so they can reduce one to a small window and watch the other one on a big window. I mean, they're in control. Statistically, interestingly, men click twice as much as women. I have a theory about that. My theory is that is the last thing in the household we have control over. And by God, we're going to use it, you know? I'll click out of a show I like just to show that I can. That's how far I've dropped to. But men do click twice as much as women, and women are thus twice as likely to click in at any one given point and then stay to the end. Men are more prone to click in and out. And so if we catch them at the beginning of the show, we have 30, 45 seconds maybe for that promise to be stated in a way that makes that person want to continue to watch the show. You might think of it as a headline and a subhead brought to life. And if it can somehow be pictorially dramatized at the same time, so much the better. The second thing about this clear promise issue is that when it comes time to actually do the commercial within the show and say, call us on the 800 number and here's now what you get, that offer too has to be pretty clear and pretty simple. 2 o'clock in the morning after they've had 3 beers is not a time to be subtle. And it's not a time to ask them to really do a lot of thinking. In the case of the Entrepreneur Show, we fixed the commercial 5 times before we got that thing to work because the offer was too confusing. I mean, they just didn't get it. They didn't understand. Originally, it was a 2-step offer. You got the tapes and some stuff sent to you now. Along with that, you got a catalog of all of Entrepreneur's manuals, and you got a certificate for a free manual. The premise being, of course, that you didn't know what kind of business you wanted to go into until you did the first part of the course, and then you would redeem your coupon to get the manual specific to the oil change business or the haircutting business. Fine premise. It just didn't work because by the time you explained it, the guy had dozed off or clicked away. So the offer had to be real simple. One of the things that makes the Go by the Inch show work is that everybody gets it in 30 seconds. And if you've seen that show, it's selling a business opportunity where you get these spools of gold and you can make bracelets for people to exact length on them. And so the deal is, I take this pile of stuff here and I put it in my car and I go to the swap meet and people come up and give me money. They get it in 30 seconds. And that's one of the reasons the show works so well. And so you want a very clear promise. And the further you deviate, the worse off you are. Easy to understand offer. You give us this money, you get this, you get this, you get this, you get this. Third, an exclusive product. Now this rule is changing. Particularly in the area of the gadgets and gadgets. But the conventional thinking in the business has always been you want to sell on television something that not only can't they get anywhere else, but that there's no price comparison for anywhere else. You don't want them to be able to roll down to Sears and find 56 of these things on the shelf and say, oh, that is changing a little bit as people are violating it and proving that it does not necessarily make any difference. How many have seen Ron Popeil's Food Dehydrator show? Yeah. The guy's on, he's becoming annoying, I think. It wouldn't be near as annoying if that were my show, but it's very annoying to me. And of course, you can buy food dehydrators anywhere. They're in catalogs, they're in stores, they're everywhere, and it hasn't seemed to make a whole heck of a lot of difference. But conventional wisdom has said an exclusive product, and I would say, given my druthers, I would rather have an exclusive product, but that's one we might be willing to suspend. Number 4 is exceptional value or perceived value, which is the same, to the customer. They have got to perceive that they are getting a lot for a little in order to move them to the phone. And that's very, very important. There's different ways to do it. We'll talk about that. 5th is physical demonstration. Physical demonstration helps a lot. That's why information type shows are harder to do than gadget shows. Amazing Discovery shows are relatively easy to do. The Juice Man show, that's why there were 5 knockoffs of that show and they all worked. That's really a pretty easy thing to figure out how to do. We get 6,000 pounds of different vegetables and fruits, and we stand up here and shove them in this machine. And it's a great show to watch. I bought from the show. I know better. And I sat there and said, this is a great story. Yeah. Because you're into the demonstration. How many have seen Fingerhut's show with the American Gladiators now for the exercise device? Have you seen that? Great show. It's one long physical demonstration. What gets harder and harder to make work is the interview format show, which for most information products is exactly what you have to start with. And so that format is tougher and tougher to make work. It worked for Personal Power. It doesn't work for some other things. And we look for ways to add drama to that show. If you've seen the Mental Bank Breakthrough show with Florence Henderson, one of the first shows that I did, that show has a little sequence in it with a live baby, what we call the stunt baby. And If you remember Saturday Night Live and the stunt baby, yeah. We're looking for a way to jazz up the interview about this self-help product. And Florence does a whole thing about that we're only born with two fears, because it's a product about overcoming fears, and we are only born with two fears. One is of loud noises, and the other one is being dropped. And I wanted to drop the kid, but I lost that argument. Actually, what I wanted to do, here's my original concept. My original concept was, see, the baby has no fear of snakes because it doesn't know. In case you didn't know that, the baby doesn't have a frame of reference. So I said, let's get a pile of snakes, and we lay the kid down in the snakes, right? This is drama. All of this I came up with when I was only the writer on the show, and someone else had to be the producer and deal with this mess. Then after I sell everybody on using the baby, I become the producer. But the whole bit with her and the baby moving around and talking, it makes her monologue more viewable. And so physical demonstration, however you get at it, can be a big help. Guthrie Ranker's producing a new show right now for a kind of lipstick. And one feature of this lipstick is it is waterproof, hurricane-proof, earthquake-proof. The woman will die, be buried. There'll be nothing left when you open the coffin 20 years from now, but the skeleton and the lips, still perfect, like she put the lips in. So how do you dramatize this? Well, what is probably going to happen in this show's not made yet, so you never know, but some lovely young ladies are going to come up out of the audience and be put in yellow rain slickers and rain hats and hosed down so that everything else runs and looks like hell, but the lips will look great. And of course, that'll be fun to watch, won't it? Okay. 6 is a charismatic spokesperson. Personal power works for a number of reasons, but certainly one of the reasons it works is Tony Robbins. And there are an awful lot of people in my speaking business who are very jealous of Tony and say, I'm better than Tony and I should be making all that money. But the truth of the matter is, they're not. They may have better content, but they don't have the charisma. And the more of this I do, the more I become convinced of how important this is. I have in my portfolio 6 or 7 shows that are all excellent shows. The testimonials are good, the promise is right, the product's right, the offer's right, the set looks great, the host did a good job, and where the show falls apart is the spokesperson for the product. The spokesperson was dull. He was not excited. He was not fluid. He was not versed. And the product. We did a PMS cure show. Hey, I thought this was great. Because we're always looking for weight loss or skin care. How do you do that without doing it again? Because it always works. And so I thought, PMS, same buyers, right? They're buying skincare, they're buying weight loss, they all got PMS. Perfect. So we'll go get them, right? And they're all griping about it, right? So this is it. And this lady doctor had, a nutritional system, how to eat, what not to eat, and what vitamins to take and so forth. She had great testimonials. We shot testimonials. They cried. They were emotional. It was wonderful. I only had one of them we were shooting the testimonials, and all 3 camera crew people were male, and I was doing the interviewing, and I was male, and we had one militant feminist of the group who interrupted the testimonial taping, and she said, don't you think it's a little strange that there's all men working on this? I said, well, the camera guys are gay. That ought to count for something. And see, that's nice. I thought that was funny, and she didn't laugh at all. Anyway, this whole show came together very well, and I thought this show was going to be a hit. Unfortunately, the doctor, the day of the taping, turned into a piece of plywood, and she sat there stiff. She was just, she didn't move her head, she didn't move her body, she didn't move nothing, and nothing we could do would loosen her up, and consequently, it doesn't make for great TV. So, charismatic spokesperson. 7, excellent real people testimonials. 8 is excellent famous people testimonials. Obviously, the difference, real people testimonials are John and Mary Schwartz, who look like they came from Columbus, Ohio. Exactly. Go to a Kmart on Sunday, look around the parking. Those are real people. If you live like in LA or New York, you don't see any real people. And if you live down here, you sure as hell don't see any real people. So you gotta go like to Milwaukee or someplace, Indianapolis. That's where the real people live. And so you can get an idea of what you're looking for. And those are real people who come forward, and say that, and the testimonial format that you're looking for is before and after. You've all heard the old Richard Pryor joke. I was a poor black kid born on the wrong side of the tracks, and I'm a rich white guy. That's the drama you're looking for in a before and after. That's true. It's a Richard Pryor joke. You're looking for that kind of before and after drama expressed verbally. I was fat, now I'm thin. I was fat. Nobody loved me. I stayed in the house. Now I'm thin. I was broke. Now I'm rich. And you want your real people to say those kinds of things. Famous people are U.S. senators, athletes, celebrities. And again, if you look at personal power, you'll see a good example of famous people testimonials who come forward and say, this thing worked for me. Or second best is a famous person testimonial that won't say, this thing worked for me, but will say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. If you look at the Entrepreneur Be Your Own Boss show, we have like Charlie Givens in there. Charlie Givens is not saying this course worked for me. What he's saying is everybody ought to be in business for themselves. I teach that to all my followers. He doesn't use that word, but I teach that to everybody. And if they're going to be in business for themselves, they should have this product because this product is great. Okay? 9, the show should be fun to watch. Again, tougher and tougher to do with information type products, easier to do with gadgets and gadgets. Still, by the way, the profit's better in information type product, which is why we keep trying to do that. But the show should be fun to watch. This is television. And when people tune in, they kind of expect to be entertained. And so you've got to not only inform them, you got to entertain them. When I started speaking in 1978, I couldn't tell a joke. I could, but I didn't get a laugh. And I said to some people in the speaking business, I said, do you have to be funny to do this? And the best advice I got, a very successful speaker said, only if you want to get paid. And so I got busy getting funny. The same thing's true in this business. You have to be entertaining only if you want them to watch the show. 10, a strong guarantee. First of all, you got to guarantee anyway. You won't get NEMA certification. You'll have regulatory problems, and you won't get the show aired a lot of places if you don't guarantee. So you're going to guarantee, or you're not going to be on the air. So as long as you're going to guarantee anyway, you might as well use it as a plus rather than a minus. My second opinion about all that is if you're selling something that you can't put a very, 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 very strong guarantee on, go find something else to sell. Because what you're selling really should be so good that the vast majority of the people are going to be thrilled when they get it. Somebody came up on one of the breaks this morning and said a very nice thing to me. He said, I buy a lot of stuff from your company, and every time I buy something, I get more than I expected. That's a real key to this, is that the customer gets more than they expect, and that'll make your guarantees work. So what's a strong guarantee? And guarantees stated in strong ways. In the Victoria Principal Skincare Show, it's the bottom of the jar guarantee. Use all the glop, pardon the expression. In the Pearl Cream commercials, it's Nancy Kwan says, if your friends don't accuse you of having had a facelift, return this stuff for a full refund. Well, we literally know, and the people aren't going to come up and say, it looks like you had a facelift. But it's another way of saying, in a dramatic way, you're going to be thrilled with this product or you're going to get your money back. So a strong guarantee is very important. 11, premiums can drive the sale. In the case of Think and Grow Rich, the very first thing I ever did in the infomercial business was with the second version of Think and Grow Rich. And the first version had run its course. It had sold some $10 or $12 million worth of merchandise. I don't know the exact number, and so I'm giving you a guesstimate. And the show was declining in performance. And the owners of the show said, can you figure out something we can do without reshooting the show from scratch? Something cheap and easy that will make this show have another life and continue to sell merchandise for a period of time. And I said, of course, because that's the answer we give everybody to everything, isn't it? And what we did is we changed the premium. We didn't change anything else. We changed the premium in the offer, And we added a series of reports that were very specific in nature. Think and Grow Rich is rather an esoteric product. It's hard to, put your fingers on what it's all about. And so we added some Think and Grow Rich research reports that were very specific in nature. And I don't remember now, 8, 9, 10 reports, whatever, but paper. I mean, not a big expense here. And then I argued for raising the price. The product had been sold at $89.95 for most of the life of the first show. And I said, gee, we're adding all this wonderful stuff. And the more I write about it, the better it sounds. So I think we should charge more for the product. And it took me a while, but I got him to test it at $149.95. And we sold another $10 million plus worth of the product with the second version of that show, raising the price from $89 to $149 and adding a cost of about $1. That's when people start to say, Kennedy's a genius. Let's get him on our next project. It's blind luck, you understand. But the principle now comes out of the lucky experience. And the principle is that often the premium can drive the sale. And the premium is at least as important in terms of what it's called, how it's titled, what's said about it, how it's demonstrated. The premium is as important as is the primary product. Sometimes you can even prop up a weak product, or as I did, give life to a dead show with the premium. 12, interesting B-roll means that they're not just sitting there in the studio. B-roll is like in the Entrepreneur Show, when we interview the testimonials who started businesses with the manuals. We actually go to their places of business. And so when Mary's talking about starting her muffin shop, you see the muffin store and you see people buying muffins and eating muffins. It's something, again, going on. Tony's show, of course, is full of it. The helicopter and all of that. That's what interesting B-roll is all about. Production values. Let me talk to you about that for a second. You will probably, in the course of this weekend that you are here, hear about video production from a number of different people. And let me first of all say that I am not a technical person. If I was offered $100,000 to go run that camera for the next 10 minutes, I'd have to turn it down. Number one, I don't know how to do it. And number two, me and electronic gear, this is the only thing that I can touch and not have it break. And that's why I like overhead projectors. But anything else, if I touch the camera, he's down for the rest of the weekend. So I say to start with that I cannot answer technical questions, but I can tell you this, that there is no one level of production quality that is good for all things. And different levels of production quality are appropriate for different things. And you can get away with much lower production values in video product that you sell than you can in video that sells. In our business today, we also have forced production values. The Go by the Inch show, which has 6 times the size of that 15-year-old company since it's been running, and has made him a great deal of money. The first version of that show we shot 4 years ago for $8,000. My fee was more than the budget. We shot the entire show for $8,000. Now, I want you to know you can't do a TV show for $8,000, so don't get excited. We shot this show in a facility in Phoenix, Arizona in July where you have to turn the air conditioning off while you tape because of the noise. The lights consist of lights hung with coat hangers from the rafters. It's not a soundstage. 3 cameras, but you might as well have had one, because they messed up most of the angles all day long. Everything about this show, the floor that we laid down for the set was a piece of paneling that you put up on your wall, and it wasn't fastened down. So one of the guests in the show, one of the persons being interviewed, is nervously tapping his foot, and you hear this thing thump, 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 throughout the interview. I mean, this thing is really rinky. You look at it and it's embarrassing. That particular version of that show ran for 13 or 14 months and made several $1 million. In fact, when we reshot it to improve the production values, we shot exactly the same show because I was afraid to change anything. I said, I don't know. One of the guys interviewed had white socks on. I said, the guy's got to come with white socks. He's got it. And I mean, seriously, if you watch the 2 shows now side by side, nothing is different except the set and the lights and the plant's better and, the production values. But the people say exactly the same things. The sweat appears on them. I mean, we left everything else the same because I didn't know what was working. But the only reason we reshot the show is because places like the Family Channel and USA and Nashville Network would not run the show. not because of content objections, but because it looked so crappy. They said, we can't put this on the air. So we reshot the show with a $35,000 budget, which is still ridiculous. Although no celebrity hosts, so that helps. We reshot the show for $35,000, and that show has now had its life and has been able to air everywhere but 2 places. Lifetime won't air it, still because of the production values the second time around. And there's another cable network, I forget which, that won't air this show because of the production values. And so now we're getting ready in December. We'll shoot that show a third time, this time with $80,000 or $90,000, a real quality production and a celebrity host. And the show will go on and make millions and millions of dollars more. So if somebody says to you, and they will, and if you read DM News, there's companies that advertise, we can do an infomercial for $49.95, or we can do an infomercial for $69.95. Let me warn you, and is Don Camp here? Is Don around? Don can also tell you of an experience with a half-hour show that should work, that is in the can, that can't work purely because of the production values. There are certain levels that have to be, and they vary by product. Production values have to be much better for a cosmetic, for a glamour product, than they have to be for a business opportunity. It makes sense if you stop to think about it, right? 14, biggest issue of all, believability. Again, if you watch the Go by the Inch show, one of the reasons it works is because everybody believes the testimonials are real. They are real schleppy Kmart people. They sit there, the one couple, while he's talking, she is dozing off. Her eyes are closing. They stutter, they stammer, they wring their hands, they tap their feet, and when we reshot the show, I wouldn't let them change any of it. Guy came running in from the crew. He said, that one guy, he just bursts out in sweat, when he starts talking. We got to, put more makeup on him. I said, leave him alone. Because people look at that and they do not question the legitimacy of those people. And I deliberately leave mistakes in shows for that very reason. The biggest single marketing issue that applies to infomercials and everything else. And so if you're not at all interested in infomercials, if the time that we have together, if you walk out of here with this thoroughly embedded in your brain, you will have benefited from being here. Because of my relationship with Guthrie Ranker, I privy to a lot of focus group research. They spend a ton of money focus group researching shows before, during, and after production and airing. I am not a big believer in focus groups, several reasons. First of all, people lie. They say what they think makes them look good, not, what is true. There's a famous survey that was done some years ago by Anheuser-Busch, and 70% of their customers preferred their premium beers, but 70% of their sales are Bud. So, somebody's lying somewhere, so they'll lie. The second thing is, people don't know why they buy. They buy here, and they justify it here. And so now when they try and explain to you and enunciate what went on, they can't. So a lot of focus group research is really skewed for all those reasons. But every once in a while, there's something that is so repetitive and so constant throughout that you got to say, this is real. And that constant in the last 2 years has been that the public doesn't believe anything. They start from a position of you're lying to me. There's one big, I don't remember the university, but one big analysis of all this has been done, and they trace it to beginning with Watergate. That was the beginning of the great age of consumer skepticism, when for the first time we really all faced the fact that our president would look us right in the eye and lie through his teeth to us. And since then, we haven't trusted a president. Then we had it with our religious figures, and then we had it with Fortune 500 companies like airlines going broke. 15 years ago, if you told everybody that airlines were going to go broke and people would be standing in airports with tickets that were no good anymore because the planes wouldn't go off the ground and nobody else would honor the tickets, they would look at you and laugh. They would say that's impossible. And yet we all know it's very, very possible. And so this whole sequence of events has led up to the point that now people don't believe anything. And in focus groups of successful shows, where we've taken shows that have succeeded and then shown them to even the buyers say, I don't believe those testimonials. I don't believe that's his castle. I don't believe that's his airplane. I think those people were paid to say that. I think those people were scripted. They've suspended their disbelief enough to buy. Imagine what the non-buyers think. So the biggest single marketing issue, I believe, of our decade is proof. And I think that you succeed or fail today with a marketing message based on how well you prove your case. And the best advice I ever heard as an uninvolved observer, I quickly say, from a famous criminal attorney, that's an attorney, that's not that the attorney's a criminal, you understand. That's that he defends people who are typically perceived to be. It's a very thin line. This very famous criminal attorney said, I don't ever want to go into a courtroom without, and his words were, a preponderance of proof. Not just enough proof, a preponderance of proof. Such an overwhelming quantity and diversity of proof that no one can argue the point. And that's how we try and build a show. That's how we try and build a sales letter. That's how we try and build anything. We now sit around and say, what's the whole list of all the things they may not believe? Where do we lose our credibility? And then we prove every single one of those things. Biggest mistakes. I've made every one of them, numerously. The first one is making assumptions about what people will buy and will respond to and won't respond to. Unfortunately, in our business, which is one of the reasons the risk is so high, there's no good way to test. Just because it sells well in a seminar doesn't mean it will sell well on TV. Just because it sells well in a print ad doesn't mean it will sell well on TV. Just because it sells well on Home Shopping Network doesn't mean it will sell well in an infomercial. There's no reliable way for us to test what we do other than to make the very best show we can and put it on the air. With that said, however, there are budget decisions to be made and commitment decisions to be made that cannot be made on assumptions. And so, for example, when Gary asked you how many of you think you have something for, and all, a room full of hands went up. If you are going to mortgage your paraplegic grandmother's wheelchair in order to do your TV show because you so devoutly believe that the public is waiting for your message, may I please make a suggestion to you? At least discuss it with Grandma. Because the truth of the matter is, we don't know. We guess. You know, we apply all that criteria, we look at what's worked and what hasn't worked, and we say, but we don't know. Where there's a will, there's an A. How many have seen that show? Hugely successful show, hugely successful product. 5 different attempts have been made to knock it off. 4 of the 5, in my opinion, better product, better show. None of them have worked. That show's a freak. And I believe no one will duplicate that show. It's not going to happen. That show is an outright freak. Juicers, 5 different shows, they all work. Skincare, they all work forever. Same clop. Why? I don't know. So you can't operate on any assumptions. You got to understand what you're into. Number 2, too narrow a net. We consistently make this mistake because, after all, how many skincare and weight loss shows can you do? And so, you know, we're always looking for something else. And generally, that something else narrows the audience that it is appropriate for. And when you get too narrow, it doesn't work. This is mass market. This is the National Enquirer. This is Parade Magazine. This is Kmart, JCPenney, and Neiman Marcus. That's what TV is. And if you're too narrow, if you're Wall Street Week, if you're probably not going to work on TV today, particularly because the money is made on national cable, not if you have to buy only Key West local broadcast, only warm climate local broadcast, only cold climate local broadcast. Probably shouldn't be doing an infomercial unless you're doing it in a local market to fuel a local business. That's a whole other topic. But too narrow a net. And I have several shows under my belt where we have risked that, knowing that it was a risk we were incurring, and we lost. I've got another one, goes on the air in another couple of weeks that we just finished production of. It's a time management show. We've done our best to take the concepts of personal power and hook them to a time management system. And if we're right, we may have a show that's going to perform like personal power. If we're wrong and time management's too narrow a topic, the client's got himself a tax loss. Number 3, by the way, those phone calls are no fun to make. That's the least fun part of my job, is the phone call saying, I got bad news for you. You're below break even. And if God himself appeared in the show, if we re-edited it with Charlton Heston parting the waters and saying, buy this, you're not coming up. Number 3, and they cry, when you deviate from basic human emotions, the basic human emotions that drive most direct response sales and most infomercials, if you watch them, are greed and sex. They are driven by people, you can't be too rich or too thin. They're driven by people who are interested in somehow being more attractive to the opposite sex, and therefore, I won't elaborate, and or getting rich, or some combination thereof. And if you analyze most of the shows, that's what's making them work. The gadget shows are kind of an exception, but not as much of an exception as you would think. Watch some of those shows. The Juice show is very much driven by a sex pitch. And if you haven't figured that out, watch the show again closely now that I've told you, and watch for it. That sale is driven by sex. Number 4, when you deviate from direct marketing and sales fundamentals. A very common thing that happens in the infomercial business, which is fortunate for me because it is one of the ways that I get a lot of consulting business and make a lot of money, is a bunch of guys who produce entertainment-type television get hired to do an infomercial. And you look at their resumes, and the client is just, hey, this guy produced 56 game shows, and he was one of the original writers on Gone with the Wind. And I mean, I'm so fortunate to have him doing my infomercial, and he has never sold anything in his life. And what you wind up with is a show that is just gorgeous, and it doesn't sell anything. Somewhere in your production crew mix, you want a guy who has sold a vacuum cleaner door to door, nose to nose, toes to toes, and beat somebody to a bloody pulp to get money out of them. That's what you want. And that's me. And if you don't have him, if you don't have that person in the mix, you're going to wind up with what I call a Jaguar infomercial. Looks great, don't run. Major issues that we think about. Number 1, is it going to be a direct sale or is it going to be a lead generation show? You all obviously understand the differences. I'm not going to elaborate on that. I am going to say this. I believe that one of the greatest unexploited areas of opportunity in the infomercial business is doing more lead generation shows. There are much more direct product sales shows than lead generation shows because everybody likes to keep it simple and divide the money up out of the first basket. They don't like to do the accounting of tracing the money. Everybody wants to run out there, get the money, come back to the cave, divide it up, and go to the bar. A lead generation show is more complicated than that, but I believe it is one of the greatest areas of opportunity for us in the business. Soft versus hard. A hard sell is like a get-rich-quick in real estate show. Buy my course tonight. You're going to buy a house for no money tomorrow. You're going to sell it for $6 million the day after. You're rich. That's a hard position. A soft position is buy my course tonight, and you're going to be a happier, better person. See, that's a little tougher, to justify that expense and get your teeth into. The further you move your promise to hard, the more likely you are of having a success. The further toward soft you are, the more trouble you're in. Very much applies to your testimonials, too. If you look at the Mental Bank Breakthrough show, the only problem we have with that show was the testimonials. That show would have been another Personal Power were it not for the testimonials. And the testimonials are all warm, fuzzy, vague testimonials. They all feel better. We're happier. Life is better. I have peace of mind. And, I'm watching them as we're taping them, and I'm saying, we're in deep doo-doo here with these testimonials. Because I don't hear anybody standing up saying, my husband ignored me for the 7 prior, and now I listen to this, and, he's jumping me in the kitchen, and I don't hear anybody saying I'm rich, and I think we're in trouble. So the soft hard is very important. The celebrity versus non-celebrity issue. There are shows that are done without a famous host. Ron Popeil's Food Dehydrator show is a perfect example. There's no famous person hosting that show. They can work. They are more difficult to make work. And the celebrity generally is a cheap advantage. celebrities, and I'm sure some other people, including Don, are probably going to talk to you about this because Don Camp is one of the sources of famous people to endorse your products and services. I use a whole cadre of sources. They generally cost less than you think, not necessarily the one you want, but one that will work, that will do the job, can be had for a lot less than you think. And they are generally money well spent, particularly with infomercials, for two reasons. One, they help you stop the clicker. Oh, there's somebody I recognize. I wonder what this is all about. And now you've got 30 seconds to try and interest them in the show. So they stop the person who's clicking up and down the dial, and that's very important. If you paid them for nothing but that, they would be worth their money. Secondly, in many cases, they add credibility, which is our biggest marketing issue, to the promise and to the show. Now, there's a difference between a spokesperson and a host, and you should know that. Technically, when you hire a host, that host is not being paid and is not going to take your script and say, this glop is the greatest thing. My wife and I use this glop. We put it on our dog. If it wasn't for this glop, we'd all be dead. He'd not go say that because he's not being paid to be an endorser or a spokesperson. He's being paid to be a host. He's going to say, tell me how the glop worked for you. And then he's going to say, that's great. That's what he's being paid. That's what a host is. You don't want to pay them to be spokespersons and endorsers because now you're going to write big checks, and worse, you got to disclaim all that. So what you want to do is massage them into doing it once you got them. That's what you want to do. And that's a little secret, and it's very simple to do. You know how you do it? You be really, 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 really nice to them. I'm not talking about limos and champagne. You know, Gary will tell you horror stories about his experiences with celebrities. Knock on wood. And I've worked with a lot of them. I haven't had a bad one yet. Some have been better than others, but I've had good experiences with everyone that I've worked with. Most of the time I've been around the agent. I haven't been dealing through the agent. We've established a personal relationship. I've had one celebrity I've worked with call the other one and tell him, Kennedy's okay. You're going to have a good experience, you know, with Kennedy. When you work with somebody like Don, they trust Don, and if Don says it's going to be okay, they know it's good. But see, these people are used to really being abused. They're just, and I've watched them on infomercial sets where I've just been a consultant, and they are abused. They're treated very badly. It's like, I paid you your 10 grand for the day. Go stand in a corner until I call you. Well, that's not the way to have a good relationship with somebody. And if you're just really, really nice to them, the first half hour, they think you're trying to do something to them because you're, you know. The second half hour, they're kind of wondering, and by the third half hour, they're your best buddy. And spontaneously, in every instance when I've worked with one, they've crossed the line from host to endorser. And without anybody asking them to, they start to get into the product and they start to sell the product. And of course, that's what you want from them. My opinion is, in most cases, use a celebrity. Spend the money, get a famous person, use them to stop the clicker. Image versus results, we talked about that. You can line up with a show that doesn't look very good. The fifth big issue that we deal with is legal. There are some very successful shows. There's a company in this business whose philosophy toward legal issues is set your economics up in such a way that you can reserve 7% for the attorneys and the fines and run the show. My preference is to sleep at night with both eyes closed. It's for this reason that I don't have a lot of life insurance. It's for this reason, after that Basic Instinct movie, we dulled all the knives in our house. And it's for this reason. That's good. Now, there's a guy back there, you got to explain that to him. See that bald-headed guy back there? Yeah. And it's for this reason that I don't do those kind of shows. There's been a lot of money made that way. You know, but I don't like having the FDA and the FTC and the postal inspectors and the attorney generals and, you know, all those guys in my offices. And some of those companies with that philosophy made a lot of money for a while, but they're not in business anymore. Because eventually, even the 7%, you know, the attorneys get all the money. So legal issues are important. And more, there's an association called the National Infomercial Marketing Association, and amongst other things, its job for us who are in the business is to deal with the Federal Trade Commission. And the association has a pretty good relationship with the Federal Trade Commission. They've done a pretty good job. And together, they have come up with, policing standards. The idea is if the industry polices itself, government won't have to. And so when I do a show, I conform not only to the legal standards, but I make sure I may not certify the show with NEMA, but I'll make sure that we conform to NEMA standards, and I will want to be this side of the line of where we can push the envelope. That means, for example, that all the testimonials are real. That means that the testimonials are telling their true and real experiences and are not reading from a teleprompter. That means that they're not paid. That means that they're not given exorbitant gifts. They're really there because they fell in love with what it is that you do, and they're there voluntarily to contribute their experiences. Some product areas are more sensitive than others in terms of claims. There's a show that I worked on, very successful show right out of the gate, a How to Get Rich in Mail Order show that was a knockoff of Gary Cochran's show, which is off the air because of these issues. And we did a knockoff show with a fellow whose name I won't mention. His initials are SP. And we did this show, and this show out of the gate pulled like 3s and 4s and 5s in terms of ratios, which I'll explain to you later, but take my word for it, that's like a 90 share in terms of ratings if you compare it to that. And so we had a big winner. And I had $1.50 a unit on the back end, and after the first weekend I said, Kenny, in another year, Kennedy ain't working. Which is why, God never lets me have one of those. Because I quit, I do the Ted deal, in a hot second. Ted said, hey, I got all the money I need, and that's it, and now to get Ted to work, you need dynamite. Gary's deal is, I got all the money I need for the next 2 weeks, so I won't work. It's just a different deal. Anyway, so this show comes out of the gate, and this show is a blockbuster. Unfortunately, it turns out that the producer didn't do their due diligence on the testimonials. And when the testimonials are checked and asked to sign the affidavits they should have signed in the first place, the testimonials are all rigged. The testimonials are all friends, relatives, neighbors, and buddies. And they have lied through their teeth. And so that show and the $100,000 that it took to produce it sits on a shelf somewhere and will never see the light of day. We do honest shows. And if you don't want to do honest shows, you should go someplace else. The big issues are these. First of all, you have to understand the regulatory people believe that the format itself is inherently deceptive. There's an article in my handout about all that. They really believe that the American public is so stupid that they can't tell these things apart from CBS Evening News. Like twice during the news, Dan Rather, an 800 number comes up on the screen, and Dan Rather says, call up and get this hair grower, But they devoutly believe this. And because they believe it, they believe the format itself is inherently deceptive. If the television industry was not totally dependent on the revenue from the infomercial business, believe me, this thing would be outlawed. The only reason we exist is because the independent television stations can't live, and the cable systems can't live without us. And so the federal government grits its teeth and permits us to exist, but they don't like it. So we're starting from a position that they don't like it. So you don't want to push them too far. There's been several infomercials done with the news set look. Have you seen any of those? Where the show, it looks like you're watching. I won't do them because you're not going to be on the air very long. They're going to find something wrong with that show, and they're going to be in your office because they detest that format. Right? So we watch those kinds of things. Back-end business. Is Terry in the room? Who's it? So when did I start? Does anybody know when I lost track of my time? Anybody know when I started? 1:30? 1:35. And it's now oh my God. Okay. Back-end business. This is very important. This is where all the money's made. Yeah, Terry, do you know what time I started? I lost track of my time. 10:45. Can you guys be quiet? Okay, thank you. Back end. This is where all the money's made. This is the reason to be in the infomercial business. So the answer to the question, what do you do with a customer when you get them? First of all, there's often more money made on a telephone upsell than there is on the initial sale. What's a telephone upsell? Telephone upsell is you call up to buy whatever product it is. You call up to buy the Magic Paint Glider, and they take your order for the Magic Paint Glider, And then after they get all the information, then they read off of a computer screen. And keep in mind, you're dealing with people who worked at McDonald's yesterday, so they got to read simple paragraphs. They read off the computer screen, thank you for buying the amazing paint glider. It just so happens that Doofus, the guy who demonstrated the amazing paint glider, has a video that wasn't talked about on the show about the 67 different ways to save money on remodeling your house. And that video normally sells for $49.95. If we add it to your order today, you can have it for $19.95. May I add it to your order today? And 30 to 40% of the people will say yes. If it's the right offer, ask the right way. And when 30 to 40% of the people say yes to the telephone upsell, there's no marketing cost to make that sale. And so there can be more money made on the 30% who say yes to the phone upsell than the 100% who say yes to the thing in the first place. And that's why that's very important. It's not an, oh, by the way, let's think up something at the last minute for the phone upsell. It's as important strategically as is the product. Package inserts. Everybody know what package inserts are? You know, the stuff you shove in a box. Don't send out a box without package inserts. Doesn't cost any more, you know. So you send package inserts. Two ways to make money with package inserts in the infomercial business. One is package inserts that sell some more of your own stuff. Two is deals with other people to put their package inserts in your box. So I go out now and I admit, you know, I say, yeah, I noticed that, you know, one of the products that I've worked with on the counter, and so I looked in your drawer and said, you know, you got a ton of this stuff. And here's what she says to me. She says, well, it comes every month. Power Talk, the last numbers that I heard, and these numbers could be off, but the last numbers that I heard, consider them close to true. 40,000 people every month right now get their credit card charged at the next Power Talk. How would you like to start the month? Going downstairs and saying, Mary, charge these 40,000 cards. I'll be out at the pool. Nice way to start the month.
40,000 cards or $40,000?
40,000 customers. You may run the numbers now since you're sitting there. Guys, you're up here with the computer. Missed half of what I said, but the numbers he's getting. Okay. 4, follow-up direct mail. This is a highly responsive list. What did Kyle Hunter say to you this morning? He said, we got to get it delivered. Can't help you with that. That's a whole other topic. Second thing we got to do is what? Get it opened. If they have a relationship with Victoria Principal, if they have a relationship with Fran Tarkenton, and a letter arrives in the mail from Fran Tarkenton with Fran Tarkenton's picture on it, do they open it? You bet they open it. Say, now I've just told you two things. I've told you how to use your celebrity for greater value, and I've told you an important thing about this business. See, this list forms a relationship with the author of the product. If they get a letter in the mail from Tony Robbins with Tony's picture on it, do they open it? Sure. Do they read it? Sure. See, we've solved the problem. We make direct mail productive because of the television. And so that list will work when it's tied to the original sale, and it will work very, very, very well. So follow-up direct mail is very, very important. They're going to be, Gary uses the term in heat. They're going to be in heat for, you know, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months about whatever they bought from you. If it's a business opportunity, they're in heat about going into business for the next 6 months, and then they're not in heat anymore. If it's losing weight, they're in heat, then they're not in heat, then they're in heat, then they're not in heat, then they're in heat. You know, but there's a time frame. And during that time frame, whatever they bought from you, you can sell them a ton of other stuff related to what they bought from you. So you should direct mail the bejesus out of them once you got their name. I mean, a client will say to me, how often should I mail? I said, how much stuff you got to sell them? If you got 100 products, you should mail them 100 letters, 1 day apart for 100 days. You know, I mean, we should chase these people because they'll be more productive than you will. The list will outperform what you're willing to do with it. That's how good the list is. 5th, by the way, it's not necessarily a good list to rent. A lot of money is made by renting TV buyer lists, but they are not necessarily good lists for you to rent because the relationship's missing. And the relationship's very important. 5th is list income, okay? And we won't talk about the list business, but it's a big source of income in this business. The final thing about all that I would say to you is this. Total customer value is much more important than anything else you build in your business. And the customer, if you treat the customer right to start with, you deliver them a good product that's more than they expected, you build a relationship with them, you're nice to them, they like it, they'll buy a lot of stuff. And the total customer value can be 10, 20, 30, even 100 times their initial sale. if this is done right. And total customer value is where you make all your money because the cost of making the sale decreases with each repeat sale to the same person. Takes less effort. Okay, how do deals come together? Some or all of these people are involved in every deal. Some or all, every deal is different. There's an author or inventor or, the person who wrote the book, did the tapes, gave the seminar, invented the widget, imported the paintbrush from Guam, whatever it is, there's that guy. Today, he is either an investor in his own project in 9 out of 10 instances, or he's got investors. He's writing a check. 2, then there's the manufacturer, whoever's going to duplicate the tapes, put the stuff in a box, whatever. There's the fulfillment operation. There's the script writer. And if you don't have a good direct marketing person anywhere, have a good direct marketing person there. The producers can figure out, even a print guy, they can take his print pitch and figure out how to turn it into TV. But if you don't have a good pitch to start with, you're doomed. So don't get somebody who's been writing Days of Our Lives, for the last 30. They're a wonderful writer, but not for this. There's an executive producer in a production company. There's often a direct marketing consultant. There's a media buy financier, somebody who puts up all the money. And there's a media buyer or buyers. Very quickly, so you know, and then I'll show you some numbers. Some projects, including Benny Guthrie Ranker projects, I'm a consultant only. I get paid a fee and a royalty, and I stand around and give advice and look brilliant. And most of what I do is say, hey, you guys forgot to sell something, And occasionally I'll do something like, I don't think that ashtray looks very good. But mostly I stand around and say, hey, where's the pitch? We just talked for 8 minutes here with no pitch. Understand this about a half-hour show. It's actually 27 and a half minutes, not a half an hour. And in that 27 and a half minutes, there's some things that you can't do anything about, okay? There's got to be a couple of commercials. So you take the time for that and take them out. There's the host's opening monologue, or however you open the show. There's the disclaimers. And so you're probably down to like 25 minutes of usable time. Very few people watch that show from start to finish. You don't have a 25-minute pitch. That's not what you've got. You've got a 3 to 4 minute pitch 7 times or 6 times. And so your people have to speak in sound bites, like the politicians. That's what they have to be able to do. And so I stand around and say, we just went 8 minutes and we didn't make a complete sale. And that's no good. Sometimes I do product development, where I'm actually involved in the case of the Entrepreneur Be Your Own Boss product, for example. That product's co-authored by me, Tony, and Fran. My name's actually on it. In the case of some other products, it's ghost-written. My name's not on it. But a lot of information product out there, one way or another, whether my name's on it or not, I wrote it. Sometimes I just do script development. Sometimes I'm co-producer. Each deal's different. More and more and more today, the only deals I'm interested in are the ones where I control the whole boat from the time it leaves the dock until the time it comes in the dock as an executive producer. I write the show, I produce the show, I hire the crew, I help with the product, I control the whole deal. Here are some numbers. These are not carved in stone. There's something wrong with every one of them, but they are more true than they are false. The average production budget right now in the industry, it's the one in parentheses. It's between $150,000 and $200,000 to put a show in the can. We're putting perfectly respectable shows in the can and testing them for less money, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. But that's probably the average. The average media time costs, now the first thing you ought to understand about media time, a guy asked me yesterday, he said, well, how much each month are we going to have to spend to air this show? That don't matter. Who cares? Okay, that's not the point. The point is, how much do we get back? That's the point. See, we live in ratios, and we're looking for ratios of 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, 2.0. That means a 1.5 ratio is for every dollar you spend, you get $1.50 back. If that ratio is true, then the answer to how much do you spend a month, you spend as much as you can. That's how much you spend a month. And that's why sometimes you syndicate your show to someone else, what we call a media time financier, someone like a Guthrie Ranker or Media Arts that will take an independently produced show and spend millions a month airing it when you might not have the millions a month to spend it. However, the average media time cost right now, the average successful show is being bought at a range of around $3 million a month. Average product cost. The industry norm says you need 5 to 1. I say you need 7 or 8. I look for 7 or 8. Anything less than 7 or 8, I'm nervous. But the industry norm is 5 to 1. What is considered a successful show? In the industry, you're considered a successful show if you do between $20 and $70 million in gross during the lifetime of the show. You can make money with a show that does a lot less than that, but that's what's considered a success in the industry. Average return on investment is 15%. The average return to the key person, the guy who wrote the book, did the seminar, invented the widget, is 3 to 5%. That's on the front end now. You understand, we're only talking front end economics. We're talking about what's being sold on the show. I'm not talking about the back end. His return on investment on his back end is infinitely greater. Here's what a show budget looks like. This is a simplified show budget. I could do 8 pages, but they wanted to be out of here 10 minutes ago anyway. The executive producer, the producers, the writers, that whole group of people, or one person who does all that, or 2 people who do, however that gets done, you're going to spend at least $10,000 to $15,000. Plus, you're going to pay them royalties, but you're going to spend $10,000 to $15,000. If someone's writing a show for you for like $1,000, run. I'm not trying to jack up your expectations. I'm telling you the truth. Run, okay? Because if they were any good, they would have a room like that. They could just sit at the LA airport and collect $1,000 every 10 minutes, and so they're no good. Or they'd be getting 10 or 20 grand to do a show. I mean, you just can't cut this corner. Set design, construction, getting ready to do a 1-day studio shoot without an audience, because an audience adds a lot of money to the budget, because it adds shoot days, because you're at the bathroom, then he's in the bathroom, and we got to stop for you to go to the bathroom and wait for you to come back, because the audience can't look different. It's got to look the same. So if you got an audience with 300 people in it, what are the odds that right now one of them has got to go to the job? So a 1-day shoot becomes a 4-day shoot just because of bathrooms. They won't stay put. And as the day goes on, Mary's got to call her husband and tell him he's going to be late, and so on and on. The 3rd day of the shoot, Susie didn't come, so we got an empty chair. We got to go find somebody that looks like Susie. On and on and on and on. So this is without an audience. Not to say you shouldn't do audiences. I'm just explaining the budget to you. Without an audience, you can do that shoot for $15,000 to $20,000. You can do all your post-production, most of which is editing, and editing is where the show lives or dies, for another $15,000 to $20,000. You can get a good celebrity host, not Charlton Heston. Okay? Everybody says what people asked for at host just kills me. I had a guy the other day. He said he's got a $30,000 budget. He wants to do a show for $30,000. He wants Alan Alda. And then he says, I swear to God, he says to me, "Are my wife and I going to be able to spend a little time with Alan to really get him turned on about our product?" I said, "Like what?" He said, an extra day or 2. I said, "You pay these guys by the day. Don't you understand? 10 becomes 20, 20 becomes 30. You can get a good celebrity host. Who can you get? You can get a Gil Gerard, who we've used once thanks to Don, and we'll use again if we can get him. I just shot a show with Jack Bannon. Jack Bannon used to be the tall, skinny reporter guy on the Lou Grant show. The Lou Grant show's in syndication. It's running everywhere. You can get game show guys. You can get soap opera guys. You can get ex-jocks. You can get actors and actresses who are at the Murder, She Wrote stage of their career, where they're doing guest shots a lot, but they don't have their own deal. That's what you can get for $10,000 to $25,000. For $25,000, you can get some pretty good people. We shot a show with Rob Weller, who used to host Entertainment Tonight in the home show. He does a phenomenal job, and 7 out of 10 people recognize his face when you click up and down in a test. $25,000, he was worth every single penny. And then you got some miscellaneous money, feed the crew and beer money and pizza money and all that stuff, and you're going to spend somewhere between $55,000 and $90,000. I'm putting very respectable shows in the can and getting a good solid test for them for $70,000. And I will happily talk to somebody about that kind of a budget. If you want to talk to me about a $25,000 budget, don't talk to me. Our lives are too short, Typical entrepreneurial deal these days works like this. You, the person who raised your hand and we're all excited and think you have something that will work on TV, you pay to produce the show and to test the show. Now we have a winner, maybe. Here's what could happen. What happens from your test is your show could come in at below break even. That's called a tax write-off. Everybody in our business has made this mistake. We've thrown money at one to bring it up from below break even. Nothing will bring it up. I got a show where Nancy Reagan appeared in the show before every commercial during her heyday, an anti-drug product show, and said, "Parents, buy this product." Below break even, that didn't help it. I mean, you can't, when they're below break even, you bury them. If you got to break even to a 1.6, you can put it in the repair shop and tinker with it and fix it. And more often than not, you're going to make that show work. So from your test, you may know you have a dead bang loser. You may know you're going to the repair shop. At 1.7 or above, you got a lot of options. And those options are, you can take that show through me to a Guthrie Ranker or to any one of the major players, and you can cut a deal on a percentage basis for that show to be aired. And amongst other things, you just got a big bank, because the better the show works, the more money they'll throw at it. You can take that show to some smaller players that you might not even find, but that are out there, who will spend $20,000, $30,000 a month to air even a marginal show and share the profits with you. You can buy your own time through media buyers and bootstrap your way up. The Therapy Plus show, which did tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars worth of business last year, they started with a $20,000 media budget, bought $20,000 worth of time, got the money, bought $30,000 worth of time, got the money, bought $40,000, and they bootstrapped their way up, and they bought all their own media and controlled all their own show. All of those, when you got a winner, you don't have a problem. That's the bottom line of all this. If you got a winner, getting the show aired is not your problem. When you got a loser, it don't matter. However, in terms of producing a show, this is relevant. This is great. It's relevant to everything. It's great. My God, 6.4%. Got to be the best test we ever had, right, Seymour? Yes, it is, sir. It's a shame we only have $23.90 left for a rollout. If you do have to refine the show and retest and fix the show and retest, you do need a little bit of money. Second to the last thing I need to tell you. Because profits are tight, particularly on the front end, we look for strategies to improve the profitability of what it is that we do. One big issue is minimizing returns. Every product that comes back does what? It reverses a sale, plus it incurs a new expense. Bad news twice. We lose the sale, plus we got the expense of having it shipped back, dismantling it, fixing it, cleaning it up, putting it in a new box. One guy who had broken his business many years ago, again, I won't mention his name, but you may remember him, a real tall, scrawny, skinny guy who did a get-rich-quick in real estate show, and I believe has the largest consumer fraud judgment against him in the state of Iowa in the history of consumer fraud judgments. Their returns were so high, so fast, and so furious that in the last months of his existence, they had one warehouse full of unopened returns while they were shipping new product out the other door. That's not good. Is the bottom line of all that. The average in the industry is 5 to 7%. You can get your returns all the way down to 2 and 3%, and there's several things we do to do that. I'll talk to you about them in a second. Two is you can lower your product or your premium cost by getting somebody to give you something for nothing, like a magazine subscription. So the magazine gets subscribers, and you get something new to give away. We had a show at one point where we had an insurance company backing the show, and they were paying $7.80 for every buyer name right out of the gate the day they hit. We don't have to make money on the product. All we got to do with the product is break even, and everybody's going to get rich on the $7.80. Subsidized product. Three is product itself that sets up a secondary or a repeat sale. Something inherent in the product itself causes them to have to buy something else and something else and something else. How do you reduce returns? Here's the 4 big ways. First is, of course, you give them a quality product to start with. So when they open up the box, they're excited, not, is this where we're at? Second is a follow-up gift. This is something's built into the product where after they listen to the 3 tapes and they fill out a survey form or whatever, they get to send it in and they get the following gift. They're now involved in keeping the product in order to get the gift. 3 is the magic box. The magic box is a box that falls apart when you open it. This is extremely important because this really does discourage returns. How many of you belong to a book club? If you belong to a book club or Columbia Record Club or whatever, you get the box and it's got what? A big tear strip all the way around it, right? And you tear the tear strip and the box comes apart in four parts. If you want to ship that stuff back in that box, you better have a bunch of tape.
I never tear it.
Okay?
I always open it so I can repackage it.
Well, we got to do something about you. You I didn't need to hear from at this particular moment, you know? Sometimes you don't need to tell all you know. But don't use too good of a package, say, because if the package invites return, you know, so the box reduces, and post-sale reassurance. In the back of the Ultimate Sales Letter book, there's an example of a letter that I wrote for Guthrie Ranker that goes out from Fran Tarkenton to the Think and Grow Rich buyer X number of days after they bought the product, and it arrives from Fran, who hosted the show, and it's what we call a stick letter. It's designed to make the sale stick, and you can read the letter. It speaks for itself. It's a basic persistent pitch. I got 2 more things I got to do, and then I'm out of here. In your handout, if you will look at your handout very quickly, please. Some of you may think that I've made some sense up here, and may want to hear some more of what I have to say. And if you'll turn to the page that has the coupon on it very quickly, let me explain to you what you can do. That coupon offers you, first of all, a big, thick book that looks like this. If you like weight and you like bulk, this is it. Some of you in the room have this book, by the way. This book, what I did, and in the print that advertises this book, I describe it exactly this way. This book is what I call Dan's filing cabinet dump. This is if I let you come to my office and bring a Xerox machine into my office and spend 6 hours there going through my filing cabinets, that's what this book is. And I literally took my filing cabinets, dumped them out on the floor, went through them and said, oh, people might like this, and I put it on a book, and I wrote copy around it that explains why that's good. And this book covers every possible way there is to sell information. If you got information products, you ought to have this book. So that's the first thing on the list in the coupon. The second thing on the list is we do some intensive direct marketing seminars, 3-day seminars limited to 12 people. We have some outstanding guest speakers. Gary has been a guest speaker for us. John Carlton's coming up, and also some people that you never see in the Halbert Circle who are wonderful guest speakers as well. We've got 24 tapes from the last couple of conferences. They would normally sell for over $300. They're here for you in this offer at $89, and it's a way to come eavesdrop on those conferences. Those conferences cost $2,995 per person to attend. You are basically eavesdropping on the first day and a half of each of the conferences where the speakers stand up and give their presentations. 3, if you're specifically interested in infomercials, we have a whole kit, including a videotape that shows you pieces of shows that we've done and a whole pile of information about the infomercial business, and that's available to you. And last is a set of 12 cassettes that are most of my marketing seminars condensed onto audio cassette. And if you want to buy the whole mess and not differentiate, it's $195 here at the seminar, and everything's guaranteed. If you get something you don't like, you can return it. We'll give you your money back anytime within 90 days. Please fill out the forms while you're here today and turn them into either Terry or I. Also, even though we've deeply discounted, 5% of the purchases will go to hurricane relief. Last thing, and then I'm done. I know you want me out of here, and I'm sorry.
I want to come up here and reflect and bask in your glory.
The future of the business is this. The economics get tougher and tougher and tougher. When you have a winner these days, it is every bit as valuable as it ever was, and in some cases more valuable because the customers are better sold, the quality of the product's better, the total customer value is better, but it's harder and harder to get a winner because media costs are going up. And so our risk in the business goes up, our payoff in the business goes up also. There are major corporate players finally realizing that this thing might be real. GM has had remarkable success with the infomercial they did for their Saturn car. The main reason that they're not airing it more is because they haven't got any cars. They finally figured out how to sell a car, and now they got no cars. You talk about a messed up company, those guys are it. But major corporations, Time Life is a big player in the infomercial business. Fingerhut, the largest user of direct mail in America, has cut their use of bulk mail, third-class mail, which is all they mail, by 20% over the last 2 years. And the major media that they are using to replace it is television, and more. Saatchi & Saatchi, one of the largest ad agencies, has just formed a partnership with an infomercial company to produce infomercials. Although they, idiotically, the guy said that he was thinking about getting Francis Ford Coppola to produce his first infomercial. This is what happens when ad agencies, get involved. I said, the guy can't even make a movie. We're going to put him in charge of an info. But major corporation players are coming. What does that mean? That means that the entrepreneurial window is closing. Over the next 5 years, the major corporation players will shoot up the value of time because they won't use the same direct response economics you and I have to live by, and gradually we won't be able to play the game anymore the way we play the game today. So the clock's ticking. Third is the ulterior motive partner, like the insurance company that wants the names. The ulterior motive partner is the future of the business. 1 or 2 or 3 players involved in a show, all with different motives, all with different uses for those names. The Entrepreneur Magazine show, Entrepreneur Magazine has a reason to play. Guthrie Renker has a reason to play. I have a back-end access to that list. I have a reason to play. There's lots of ulterior motives behind that show. That's the future of the business. You've been a nice group. I've had fun. I hope you've had fun. I'm going to be around all the way through Monday morning. I will give free half hours to anybody who wants to meet with me, first come, first served basis, and sit with you whenever you want to and talk about anything you want to.
I'd like for you to give him a really big hand. Now, thank you very much.